So this is joint work with Mark Braverman, who's a computer scientist at Princeton. Okay, and we're at a stage where still sort of we have to do some thinking about the way we model data, information, and belief. So this is really a great opportunity to make progress on this topic. All right, what are capitation schemes? Actual example, so Medicare Advantage gives people over the age of 65 the opportunity to leave the public sector and get their insurance from a private provider, okay? When you do that, the private provider will get a fixed payment that corresponds to essentially your expected cost of service if you had stayed in the public sector. Okay, so basically the way these things are run is there's this thing called the CMS formula that's basically the expected cost given what we know about the patient in the public sector, basically as a function of characteristics. You run a regression like that of what is the cost of treating the patient in the public sector, and this formula, this will be your capitation payment. So this is okay. So this is, for instance, if I'm male between the age of 70 and 75 with a precondition of cancer, let's say, there will be a formula that says what is my expected cost of treatment in the public sector. This is how much a private provider, a private insurer, will get paid to take me off the book of the public sector. Okay? So this is used essentially to outsource public services to the private sector. Healthcare is a big deal application, education is another one. Okay? So you pay the private service provider a fee to take care of the patient. Okay, and capitation works very well, at least in the sense of getting an efficient allocation of patients to people who have a comparative advantage in taking care of them when the price is right. Okay, if you give exactly the right cost, the expected cost given all available information of taking care of the patient, they'll select efficiently the people they want to treat, and you'll get an efficient allocation. Okay? So you need to have the capitation fee precisely tailored to the cost of treating a particular patient. Okay? But if the price is not right, if there are characteristics that are not included in this regression but that the private provider has access to, then even though he has no comparative advantage, there will be basically a residual. That's basically you have a bias in the pricing. He'll treat the people who are relatively cheap. He'll select in the people who are relatively cheap to treat. So one of my colleagues at Princeton has an applied work on this, so Ileana Kuzimko with Mark Dogan and a couple of other co-authors put numbers on this, and for Medicare, the numbers are basically thousands of dollars per patient in terms of by how much the cost of Medicare increases because of private selection. With big data, basically, with the availability of data, there has been a push to say, well, we should make these capitation formulas better. Now we have a lot of data available on patients. Let's make this capitation formula better. Let's make it more precise. This way, maybe we can sort of win the sort of information horse race. Okay? And this is sort of the question that we want to sort of think through with this work. Can the availability of big data, basically high-dimensional records about patient, help us get the price right? And more generally, can the availability of high-dimensional records about patient help us improve capitation schemes? And what I'm going to try and, part of the exercise is going to be for us to model what we mean by big data. We're going to take, so this is going to be, the notation is going to be heavy because I'm going to model data seriously. And part of the difficulty is going to say, well, okay, sure, the records are getting very precise, but the sample of patients that you have available to estimate your capitation formula is not increasing. So estimating the capitation formula is not going to get easy. Okay, and so the message that we're going to push is that if you take the sort of right big data limit, this will not work. You'll never be able to get the price right. Because sure, you'll have more and more covariates, but the coefficients will be estimated with more and more error, basically. But you'll be able to use this data still to run mechanisms that will use, basically ex post realizations to get better selection. I'm going to get directly to the model. Players' actions pay off. I'm going to give you a particular implementation of the information structure but we want to think very hard about doing things that are robust to the particular information structure. Okay, so you have a public provider P0 who's responsible for a set of patients, and you have an independent private provider P1. Okay? Patient I has some type tau I, and the type space is going to be large but finite. And I'm going to think of the type. Part of my big data assumption is going to be types are observable, but I'm going to say not interpretable in the sense of I don't know. I can observe your type. I can say, you are a 45-year-old male, who grew up over there and so on. I do not know how to interpret it. I do not know what is what is the cost of treatment for a person with that type. Okay, so types are a sufficient statistic of costs, but I don't really know the mapping yet. Okay, but I know it's a sufficient statistic in the sense that, mu I is going to be the distribution of types in this population. Okay, so that's the sample distribution of types in the population of patients that I need to treat. Okay, realized cost of taking care of patient I for provider P. C hat, and that's positive, and that's drawn from some distribution that's dependent on the type and the provider. Okay, so you're going to have comparative advantages in taking care of people. Okay? I'm going to have a common prior, but that's just to talk about welfare. I don't want mechanisms that rely too much on this common prior, so I'm going to have sort of interim IR constraints. So that in the end, I can't really use that common prior for much. It just helps me state welfare. You could have a non-common prior, and then you need to state everything in terms of the prior of the private provider. All right. Okay. So for now, for the first part of the talk, I'm going to make this. I'm going to have the following. Very specific information structure that makes everything work nicely, and then I'll tell you how to generalize things when this is not the case. So I'm going to assume that the cost of treating patient I by provider P, it's an expected cost of treating patient I by provider P, where eta I is basically a subset of characteristics. So eta I is drawn from E, and E is a partition of the type space. So if you think about this, I can observe a lot of characteristics about all of you. A subset of characteristics is going to be, for instance, your age. Okay, but there are many other characteristics that make up your type, whether you have a history of cancer, what were your previous costs, etc. But age, it's a small subset of characteristics. I could bundle people by, let's say, ages. Okay, and so this is saying here that comparative advantage only depends on this small subset of characteristics. And then you have sort of idiosyncratic cost terms that depend on there is noise from the patient, but also depend on the type. Okay, so for instance, one thing that seems to be true in particular is you could imagine something where comparative advantage really depends on the types of diseases you have, but then you have idiosyncratic costs that, for instance, depend on ethnicity. So one example that they give in practice is apparently there were big gains to try and select patients who had, expensive diseases but were also Hispanic. For some reason, Hispanics, were slightly cheaper to treat. Okay, so you had private providers actively try to market to Hispanics for that reason. Well, but what this is going to tell me is here. Comparative advantage only depends on a small dimensional set of characteristics. Okay?
Eta I is the element of the partition E that contains tau I. There's both eta I and tau I in that right-hand side.
Yeah, so I'm going to note this down. So tau I is a type. I'm a 45-year-old male with a past history of cancer. That's included with, in this bigger set, in some sense, of characteristics, and that's part of a partition. Okay? And so for this example, I'm going to assume that's going to make things very simple, that the comparative advantage, really the one that matters, is going to be common knowledge. Okay? And the justification for that is, if comparative advantage really only depends on a small set of characteristics, estimating it precisely is not difficult. Okay? Let's say if comparative advantage only depends on the disease, let's say cancer and not, your zip code and a bunch of other things, we have enough people who have cancer to estimate the cost of taking somebody in cancer in the public system. What we don't measure very well is how, your zip code, your other habits will correlate with the residuals. Okay? And that's what people select on. I see. Okay. Hopefully that will become clear in a second. Okay, what is the just to have an example, what is the structure on these residuals over here? It's basically going to be a log normal. You have epsilon tau, that's a normal shock that depends only on your type, and then you have an idiosyncratic shock. Okay, and okay. Only eta matters for comparative advantage. So in a sense, efficient selection should only depend on eta. But then you have these residuals that can be in part predicted using your characteristics. Okay, so for comparative advantage, only the fact that I have cancer matters, but the fact that I'm French lets the provider predict my idiosyncratic costs. Okay? So they would try and select, let's say, the French if they're cheaper to treat. Okay. Yep.
I mean, just with this setup, it's not clear why capitation schemes are even a good idea. You know what's efficient. You know which patients should go to the private sector and which should stay in the public sector. You know the average cost. You could just pass a law that says everyone for which it's efficient for the private sector to handle, they handle it, and we pay you the average.
So. I'm going to deal a little bit with the case where you don't know what you should be doing. Okay? Second thing, you can't do that. This is not an allocation problem in which you can tell people where they get to go. People get to decide. So what you need to do is you need to get the private provider, to do the marketing right. Okay? So this is not an allocation problem where I can tell everybody, I can order everybody where they want to go. It's kind of it's like an auction where the object has preferences about where you need to go, and you need to convince to do the work of convincing the object to apply. What are the actions? So the private provider P1 gets to pick an expected selection policy. Again, for my example, so a selection policy, it's a mapping from types to 0, 1. What is, how representative is the population that I'm treating? And you have a realized selection. Lambda is a subset of the set of patients. And for now, I'm going to set the cost of selection to 0 just to make things very simple. Okay. What are the pairs? So I'm going to demand exact budget balance. So you're going to have transfers from the public to the private provider. And payoffs U0 and U1 take the following form. It's payoff to the public provider. It's minus the transfer plus what would have been the cost of the public provider for the people it's outsourcing. Okay, and the cost of the payoff of the private provider, it's the transfer it receives, minus, the realized treatment cost for the person, for the patients it's selecting in. Okay, so I'm assuming that the cost of treating that a patient with characteristics eta by the public providers are known. So I'm going to assume that this is common knowledge. Let's say I'm not assuming I'm not assuming that there is complete information about the cost of the private provider. You have a public data set of the public provider's cost. So it's basically past data. So for individual I in that past data set, here was my realized cost. So you have this data available. I'm assuming that for every type that I observe, this data set is not empty, so I have cost data on everybody. The private provider knows his own cost, but he also privately observes some data. Okay, and what is the data that he observes? For every type, he gets one more signal. That's basically, the idiosyncratic. This is equivalent to one cost observation for each of his own cost for each type, and that's basically observing epsilon tau plus epsilon x, where these are two standardized normal. So these are okay, and the epsilon tau.
But tau is not a sufficient, I thought tau was
No, tau is a sufficient statistic
for
of
cost or something?
of the distribution of costs.
Distribution of costs, okay, not the limitation.
Well, you have some idiosyncratic shocks. So okay, let's go back to
Okay, I'm with you.
eta, tau, and then I. Okay, nobody will see more than tau in some sense in terms of information. Okay, and I'm going to use at some okay. And the last thing I'm going to use is the public provider's access to a holdout sample of its own cost. That's independent of the data seen by the private provider. Okay? And you could think of this as, well, here if I'm assuming perfect selection, this is a little bit of a problem. You really need to think of it as a holdout sample that's not revealed to the private provider. If you can't have perfect selection, you could think of it as the sample of patients that the public provider gets to treat at the end of the game. Okay, so the sample of patients that are not treated by the private provider. So the sample of patients available is becoming large. So there are a lot of people in the US, but the type space is also getting large at the same time. Okay, so this is saying, oh, I have a lot of data on people, so this is going to give me a chance to become efficient in the sense, I really have D0, the data set available. I have a large sample of patients, but I'm assuming that, let's say, essentially, the subset of data that applies to individual types is not getting huge. So D0 tau, that's the subset of my sample with people of characteristic tau. The number of, I'm taking a limit as the data set, the sample size grows large. And sure, I'm assuming I have a lot of data available on people, so I can really know everything about you. But in some sense, at that point, everybody is becoming essentially unique. Not unique, maybe, not exactly unique, but there are not so many people. At some point, when you look at the number of French people who live in the Princeton zip code, who are economics professors, you have 4 of them. Okay? Yep.
I'm getting really confused. Is there adverse selection here? Because you're saying tau is observable, so there's no adverse selection in terms.
So you're going to have adverse selection because the private provider has private information. He's getting this extra little bit of a signal. So even though the types are not observable, even though the types are observable, the fact that I can't map them to a cost allows the private provider will allow the private provider to select, to select a subsample of patients that are actually cheaper to treat than what the capitation formula is saying. This is saying I get to observe, I'm thinking of a limit where, yes, sure, I observe who everybody is, what their types are. I observe who everybody is. But by doing so, I'm basically slicing up I'm bunching people into smaller and smaller, buckets. I get to put every person in the bucket to which they belong. But now, I'm getting to the limit where, I have a huge polynomial of costs. You can think of this as me putting, a lot of covariates and, functions of covariates. But at that point, I have almost an identification problem. Like I have more covariates than people in my data. Make sense? And I think that's the limit that you get when you want to add condition costs on a lot of covariates. Sure, you observe a lot about people, but that doesn't mean that you get to predict their costs necessarily very precisely. So this is saying, for one tau, this is saying the data available on this guy is relatively limited. And this is saying weighted by the patient population, this is not big, okay?
I'm not sure what yet. I mean, why is it so important that the number of individuals of type tau is essentially finite? So why is it important to you?
It's going to show up in the results. So what you're going to have that as a result, essentially, unless this is getting to infinity, there is no mechanism that doesn't use the holdout data that will induce efficient selection. And when I get to use the holdout data, then this doesn't matter anymore. You have mechanism that use exposed realization that will induce efficient selection. Okay, let's get to an example of, this is what's happening now. Okay, so that's what I'm going to call sparse capitation. This is what's happening now. The payment that a private provider receives for selecting a subsample lambda of the set of patients is basically the sum over individual patient of the capitation payment per patient. And you can think of it as, well, the expected cost of treating that patient conditional on the legitimate selection characteristics. So we are only including the selection characteristics that we think are relevant to the selection problem. So, okay. So I have cancer, what's my age? Okay, given the public data available. Okay, and here, I mean, I was making, you can make I mean, here actually you know the guy's expected cost conditional on eta, that's just k of eta. Okay? Then what is the private provider solving? He's getting this payment from the public provider, okay? So that's the expected cost of treating somebody with type eta. Then he has his own expected cost of treating somebody with type eta, but then he forms his own estimate of the idiosyncratic cost. So I benefit from selecting type taus such that the idiosyncratic cost is negative. So my estimate of the idiosyncratic cost, the one that is not related to comparative advantage, is negative. Okay? But really for efficiency, you'd like to not have that term. Okay? Okay, and the result is as follows. If the private provider is constrained to use selection rules that are measurable with respect to the set of legitimate selection characteristics, to the etas, then, so this is truthful selection and truthful revelation of the holdout data. I went a bit fast over here. It's going to be the unique equilibrium. And if the private provider is not constrained to use a selection that's measurable with respect to legitimate characteristics, then there exists some positive constant such that for any size of the public data, the loss of surplus, so this is the maximum surplus you could get, this is the surplus from the mechanism, is going to be of order I, where I is the set of patients. Okay. Surplus, that's this, that's the cost savings for allocating people correctly. Okay, so the surplus of a selection rule is going to be how much am I saving from allocating to the private provider, somebody whose cost from being treated by the public provider is higher, okay? Minus the cost of selecting them, but that is 0 for now. The efficient selection rule, by my assumption that comparative advantage only depends on those characteristics eta, is measurable with respect to eta. Okay, so that defines my sense of legitimate and illegitimate selections. Lambda star is the efficient selection rule. Okay, so one potential use of the availability of big data is to say, well, this was just a bad capitation formula. You were just only conditioning your expectation of costs on the legitimate selection characteristics. Of course, there is a bunch more data available that the private provider is selecting on. Maybe it's enough to just condition costs on the whole set of characteristics. I'm going to call that rich capitation. Okay, so here it's saying that, I'm going to pay you for each patient you select, my expectation of your cost, not given the legitimate characteristic, but given the full type that I observe. Okay, so that's charging them the previous baseline capitation rate plus my estimate of the idiosyncratic cost term. Okay, so this is saying now I'm going to have a really good capitation formula in which I don't only include the legitimate selection characteristics, but everything I see about you. Okay, and I'm going to run some, whatever. Okay, and this is also not going to work. Okay, so the expectation of the provider, of one of the two providers for that term is the following thing. It's whatever. It's going to be the weighted average of signals. So it's a normal learning model. Right? So I have log normal cost, but you can, go to logs. It's a normal learning model. The expectation of a provider takes the following form. It's the weighted average, basically his conditional belief about the epsilons, is a normal with that mean and that variance, and then, the expectation of a log normal, is the expectation of the mean minus a half of the variance, so I get this term. Okay, so the costs were a kappa plus some EI tau, and I said that the EIs were essentially exponentials of okay, so I'm defining xi as basically okay, and I was defining the side signals that the private provider was seeing as okay. So we had these idiosyncratic cost terms, and we are getting signals about the determinants of those cost terms, okay, about essentially the epsilon taus. You get these epsilon taus for observing your cost data. This is something that the private provider was getting on top of it. So essentially, the estimates that you're getting conditional on data, it's exponential of the weighted average of signals minus the variance. Okay? The public provider gets those signals. The private provider gets one more. Okay? And the private provider is going to make money out of the difference between the two. The difference between the information available to the private provider versus the public provider is the public provider has all this publicly available data to form its cost estimate. The private provider has one more data point. Okay? Okay, so clearly the magnitude of this, what is the sample size of the data available about a patient of type tau, is going to determine the magnitude of the adverse selection of the private provider against the public provider. Okay, and the result is the following. There's going to be continuous functions, continuous strictly increasing functions that are 0 at 0. Okay, such that the efficiency loss between so the difference in surplus between the efficient surplus and the surplus from rich capitation is bounded below and above by I, the sample size, times something that has the following shape. So it's the term that I had before. So the expectation under the measure of the sample of the treated population of 1 over what is the sample size of data available on people of type tau. Okay, and same thing on the other side. Okay, so here I'm going to want to argue for a use of that data that's going to get me efficient selection. Okay, and the idea is all those capitation schemes were basically using the data to form ex-ante estimates of the cost. They were giving people this one payment for each patient they selected, and so it was really important to get the cost estimate to be very precise. Otherwise, there was some room to start selecting people. All right? Okay. So now I want to have a capitation scheme that sort of, by design, takes care of this strategic selection by the private provider. And there's going to be two parts to the mechanism. The first one is going to be to use the holdout data that I have available. So I'm assuming that I have this holdout data that's getting realized. It's not big, but at least it's uncorrelated with the information that the private provider has. And observable types to form an unbiased estimator of the cost of treating the sample selected by P1. Okay, and there it's going to be, an idea that shows up in other work that, well, ex ante, the signal that you have is, the signal that you have is imprecise. If you use it to form an ex ante price, then you're going to get an imprecise price. But if you use it ex post to provide incentives, then you're going to get, the correct expectation. You're going to get the correct behavior. Okay? But the problem is, you also need the public provider to reveal its holdout sample of costs truthfully. And so what we're going to do is we are going to interact this estimate of costs with the private provider's deviation from legitimate selection. I'm going to use the holdout sample H. Okay? But I'm going to be, so the public provider, so this was in some earlier slide, but I skipped over it. The public provider has to encode a report of that holdout sample. Okay? And in particular, the public provider may want to misreport its own cost of treating people to reduce the payment it has to make. Okay, so here, in particular, the public provider has a biasing strategy. It can choose to bias its own sample of costs. Okay, so what does the scheme look like? You're going to start with basically as a baseline capitation payment, you pay people your expected, the one that depends only on legitimate characteristic, on legitimate selection characteristics. So you start with paying the private provider your expected cost of treating a patient with characteristics eta. And then you are going to slap at the end something that depends on the reported holdout sample, a capitation adjustment. Okay? That's defined as follows. Okay? There are two terms, so it's the capitation adjustment for people of type eta given my holdout sample R and the sample of patients selected is going to be some covariance for people of type eta, so of a subset of characteristics eta. And it's going to be the covariance between selection patterns of the private provider and residual cost estimates. So what is this? SI, it's basically the over-selection, it's the deviation from representative selection of the private provider. SI, it's the mass of people of type tau I given eta. So it's the conditional distribution in the sample population selected by the private provider divided by the conditional distribution of types tau I in the population of patients. Okay, so this is the private provider. This is the private provider's deviation from legitimate selection. When the private provider selects people on legitimate characteristics, the expectation of this term has to be 0. Whenever the private provider selects patients only on the basis of characteristics eta I, that term is going to be 0. Okay, that's the distribution of the population selected by the private provider. Okay? If I'm only selecting on the basis, if my selection strategy is measurable with respect to legitimate characteristics, then this term is going to be 0 in expectation, conditional on eta. Okay, so this is the deviation, this is the private provider's deviation from representative selection. Okay? And this is a residual of cost estimates in the reported holdout sample. So it's for every data point in the reported holdout sample. You know, the weight, it could just be one of them, you only need one, but let's just take the average of what was the cost of treating a patient of type tau I in my holdout sample minus my baseline capitation payment.
And who's the public provider? Who is it reporting these costs to? Some external. I would have thought that the public provider is the one who's implementing this whole scheme.
This is not clear, actually. You can think, I mean, I desire efficiency. You may think of Congress at some point desiring efficiency. The public provider is, you know, some set of, you know, is Medicare 5 years from now or whenever. And he's reporting, you know, there is some, you know, he's reporting to the law or whatever. Okay? Yes?
Suppose the technology of treatment is not independent of the characteristics, including what we're calling illegitimate characteristics. So we would actually want some incentive, and suppose there's always innovation also, let's say habits of patients, psychological dispositions, and so on, interact with treatment. So shouldn't the benchmark be an identical deviation from legitimate selection, so that insofar as each individual provider has some unique technology that uses illegitimate characteristics synergistically with other.
I mean, so now this technological assumption, I'm counting as legitimate anything that matters for the interaction, anything that's in the technology.
Well, but isn't it special for each provider that
Yeah, I mean, so possibly. I mean, something that in some sense is a big assumption here is that this, you know, subset of characteristics that matter for technology in some sense, for which people can have a technological advantage, is commonly known. I'm going to have an extension at some point that tells you what you can do when this is not known, when the set of legitimate selection characteristics is not known, and you actually need the private provider to tell you what he wants to select on. That's going to cost you something. Here I'm assuming that I know, you know, what matters for efficient allocation, and you're suggesting, well, maybe with innovation, people are going to come up with, you know, now I have a better way to take care of patients with diabetes, that now I can get them to use their statins more regularly, and I'm going to have a comparative advantage for treating them, and now I want to report that to the system so that I'm allowed to select on these types of people. And we allow for that. I may not have time to go through it. That's an extension that we allow for. Basically, you can get the private provider to report what characteristics he wants to select on under some constraints. So there is a variant of the system, of the mechanism, in which you can let the private provider submit what criteria he's allowed to select people on. Okay, so for instance, I could say there are 10,000 characteristics of people. We all agree there is this 10,000. And you can choose any 5 and have a binary classifier out of any 5. And that, for instance, is not going to have a big cost, because for any 5 characteristics, I can estimate my costs pretty well. If you get to do more fancy things with those, then you'll get a bigger penalty. We get a penalty that depends on the complexity of the class of classifiers that are allowed to use, that you're allowed to use. So you get, you know, something like the surplus is going to be the efficient surplus minus some penalty, and the penalty depends on the class of classifiers that you're allowing the private provider to use. So there will, you can allow for what you're suggesting, letting the private provider tell you, I have a new thing that I want to select on, but there is going to be some cost to it. Let me just just finish covering for why that system works, why that mechanism works. Because I'm slapping this adjustment on the public provider, on the private provider, and that this is, assume that the public provider is reporting truthfully, is reporting his own cost data truthfully, his holdout sample truthfully. Then, if you are selecting types that are cheaper, in expectation, that adjustment is going to be negative because my realized cost for those types that you are selecting is going to be, is going to be lower than the expectation conditional on type eta. Okay, the extreme version would be whenever you get somebody, it's not the mechanism that I'm proposing for, and the reason why I'm not proposing this will come next, but one way to get efficient selection would be whenever you select somebody of type eta, I will look at my holdout sample, I don't tell you what it is, and I will give you the cost of that guy in my holdout sample. Because it's a holdout sample, it's not correlated with your own data, so in expectation, the payment that you are getting, is the right one. Make sense? It's unbiased. Okay, I'm getting an unbiased estimator of the treatment cost. Okay? The reason why you can do that is if I have this mechanism where I just pay you what was the cost realization in my holdout sample, then you have a really simple biasing strategy. You're going to downcode all your own patients. You're going to say, the private provider is saying, oh, treating people was very, very cheap this year. Okay, then you have to make no payments to the private provider. Okay? If an extension of this to insurance markets would have that even more, because there you would be relying on the cost reports from other providers. Yep.
The assumption here is that the private provider doesn't actually know what the capitation formula is going to be until he isn't informed until after he selected the people.
So he knows everything about that formula. It is just that there is an element of the formula that's only revealed ex post. Okay, and that's the same thing as that shows up in other places in mechanism. I'll talk a little bit about this. Okay. How do we take care of correct reporting by the public provider? Is we only punish for deviations from legitimate selection. So whenever the private provider is selecting only on legitimate characteristics, okay, whatever this term is, this term has expectation 0. Whenever the private provider is selecting on legitimate characteristics, okay, so his selection strategy only depends on the eta, then this term has expectation 0. Okay, so regardless of what the public provider reports as its holdout sample, the private provider guarantees itself this capitation payment. Okay, so there will be no benefit from the public provider to misreport its holdout sample cost because we interact, this residual costs with the selection, with the deviation from legitimate selection. Okay, so if as the public provider I report very low cost, so let's say now I'm the government is cash trapped, or Medicare is cash trapped, it wants to lower its cost, it reports really low cost of treating people. This will have no effect on the realized payment to the private provider because the expected selection is this term has expectation 0. Okay, so where are we using big data here? We're saying we're not trying to use this big data to get correct cost estimates. We are using the observability of types to form a measure of an unbiased measure of cost, an unbiased estimator of cost, but it's not precise. What matters is that it's unbiased. This way, using it in the future gives me a precise ex ante cost estimate. And we are using the observability of types to compute this measure of non-representativeness of selection. Okay, I need to observe the type to measure the non-representativeness of the private provider selection. And these two things will give me an efficient mechanism. Okay, so this mechanism gives me efficient selection and efficient reporting, etc., etc. And both get, conditional on all the data that's available, they get a positive expected payoff.
Was it important for the RIs to be defined? I think you just said it, but I don't know. For the RIs to be defined the way you did this there, or could you just make the RIs, big numbers?
You could make the RI. What do you mean? Just one of them. That would be enough.
I just set it equal to a big number. I mean, you want to. If the SIs are essentially 0, then it doesn't really matter what the RIs are, does it?
I mean, it matters of path because if the private provider was going to select inefficiently.
Well, but did you want to give incentives?
So, I mean, you could have a different mechanism. I mean, it cannot just be a big number. I mean, it needs to have the right expectation. The expectation of the RI needs to be 0.
But I wanted to give the private provider incentive to make the SI have expectations 0.
So this will be true with this formula. This will not be true always.
No, I'm saying I'm just asking, would it help to get the private provider to make SI have expectation 0 by setting RI to be a big number?
No, I mean, then if you just set RI to be a constant big number, no, it needs to have the correct expectation. If you set it randomly, you'll get inefficient selection. If you make RI just a really big number, I mean, if it's a constant, maybe that doesn't matter. If it's a constant, you're back in the previous case, basically. Then you wouldn't get anything out of it. If it's a constant, basically, whatever the selection you have, that term has expectation 0. So this additional payment is not correlated with the selection, and you'll basically back in the previous case where they'll engage in, these adjustments are not doing anything for you. You need these adjustments to be, you need this term to have a large to be big and negative when he's selecting the relatively too cheap types. You could do something like this if you wanted. You could just have a penalty that depends on the selection. That would be, just a big negative function of that SI. Okay, you could just do something like that. Punish people for non-representative selection. If people can select types perfectly, then that's going to be fine. But if there is a cost to selection, then that won't be efficient. You'll get them to not select types that they can, they'll just not participate in some sense. Okay. So, one of the important extensions is to think of, this presumes that we knew the private providers, the dimensions of comparative advantage. Let's assume we don't. Okay, so now it's a general function. Your technology depends on the whole set of types of characteristics of the patient and the provider. Okay, I'm not going to make any assumption about the decomposition of costs between a comparative advantage and an idiosyncratic cost. Okay, and both of them are unknown. I'm just assuming that costs are bounded. Okay, and I'm going to allow for positive selection costs. And I have the same assumption about data, that types are observable. Okay. Now I'm going to have a notion of efficiency relative to some set of legitimate characteristics. I'm going to say the surplus generated by some selection strategy given the data that's available to people. That's this. That's the cost savings from allocating somebody with a high expected cost to the public provider to the private provider, given the data that we have. Okay, and again, now we have to make those decisions given the data that we have. I'm going to the very abstract information structure. And this, the surplus from essentially a partition and data available, it's basically the maximum surplus when you are using selection strategies that are measurable, expected selection strategies at least, so the realization maybe, whatever it is, but expected selection strategies that are measurable with respect to this partition. Okay, so this is saying if I allow the private provider to select on, let's say now on diabetes, because maybe that's what matters. Okay, what is the surplus achievable when I'm using selection strategies measurable with respect to this partition? People without diabetes, people with diabetes. Okay, so here's so I'm going to give you a mechanism. It's not going to achieve efficiency anymore, so you're going to have the question, could we do better? And so then I'll tell you, if you did direct mechanism design with this, is this bound tight? Okay, I'm going to show you something along these lines. So if you take a collection of partitions, so an example is, for instance, let's say there are 10,000 characteristics, and partitions is, the set of, the set of partitions that can be generated with binary classifiers that only use 5 of those characteristics. So I'm going to talk about those. So sparse linear classifiers. You have covariates. Tau is basically, okay, so that's a bunch of covariates. And a sparse classifier would be, I'm going to take V, that's going to be a bunch of zeros and maybe a few positive values. Such that the number of Vi different from 0 is less than D. Okay, so that's a vector with less than D positive entries. And a classifier would be, so one partition would be the following thing. The set of people such that the dot product is positive, and the set of people such that the dot product is negative. Yeah, that's the partition associated with a vector V, a scoring rule V. Yeah, that's a binary classifier. I'm using a vector. It's a D-sparse classifier. I have a scoring rule that uses less than D characteristics of the patient, and I'm classifying people into the people I take in, whose score is positive, and the people I don't want to take in, whose score is negative. Okay, so that's one partition. Each vector of each scoring rule gives me a partition. Okay? Script E is a collection of partitions. So you could say, for instance, the class of binary classifiers, the class of 5 sparse binary classifiers. That would be the set of classifiers in which private providers are allowed to select people on up to 5 characteristics. They are allowed to use scoring rules based on up to 5 characteristics. Okay, so they can choose the scoring rule within this class. Okay, so what is the mechanism? So data D0 is shared with the private provider. The private provider picks a partition of legal selection characteristics for him to use. For instance, I want to select people on the fact that they have diabetes. Okay, so I get to pick. Okay? And then he's rewarded according to the same formula that we had before. It's the same formula, except that now, because I don't necessarily, my own costs, given the characteristics that the provider is selecting on, I have to estimate. The difference is that now this eta is an endogenous object, and I need to estimate this thing. Okay? And there's going to be some estimation error because I don't know. This has to be estimated from data. Okay? And so the estimate that I put here is the sample estimate. It's just the sample estimate given cost in D0. Okay, so I'm unrolling the same mechanism, except that now the public provider's cost conditional on legitimate selection characteristics that are now endogenous, that are picked by the private provider, need to get estimated from data. Okay? So I estimated, I used the empirical average, this way it's prior free. And of course, this is, because there is some estimation error here that there wasn't before, potentially there could be some room from the private provider to select a model that games the system a little bit. Okay? But my question is now, how big is this thing? Okay? And we do this. So we tell you, so the surplus is going to be the efficient surplus given the class of partitions that you are allowed to use, minus some penalty that we have an explicit bound for, and that's basically depends on the complexity of the class of models that you are allowed to use. So for people who do model selection, that's actually a penalty that is one that you see in the model selection literature. That's a Rademacher complexity. For this specific class of classifiers that I've defined, so these sparse classifiers, this bound is of the order, so there is some constant, there is some constant. Cmax, that's the maximum cost you can have, the sample of patient, and then a term that's square root of D, that's the number of classifiers, in the number of non-zero entries in my classifiers, D log of my sample size divided my sample size. Okay? So D0 is of the order of the sample size, so this is small compared to I. Okay, but as the number of classifiers become big, this is getting worse and worse. Okay, I need to conclude. All right, now I have some loss of efficiency. So you could think of, I gave you one mechanism. Are there mechanisms that could do better? Okay, if you look at the following exercise where you look at the set of direct mechanism with exact budget balance under some prior nu, and this would be the efficiency loss of mechanism G given prior nu, given a class of rules that given a class of measurable selections you can use. So that would be the loss from efficiency of this mechanism under nu. So surplus of the mechanism, maximum surplus you can get using selection rules measurable with respect to a partition E in E. The result is the following. The maximum loss, so maximum over environments, then minimizing over direct mechanisms, the efficiency loss of those mechanisms compared to what you could do by selecting people in E, has sort of a similar expression. It's going to be maximum over partitions in E of 1 over the square root of D0 eta. I screwed up something. Okay, if I'm using these sparse classifiers, the eta drops out and it's something of that order. And so basically we are tight up to an order of magnitude, a square root of log D0, okay, which is a small number. All right, that's all I had time for. Thanks for holding with me.